Welcome to the final session, in which we'll talk about the last steps of the research process, namely how to analyze data, how to derive implications from the analysis, and how to write and potentially publish the paper. This first video focuses on data analysis. There are basically two different approaches to the analysis of qualitative data. On the one hand, there are the more analytical methods, and on the other hand, there are the methods that rather investigate the stories behind the people, behind the interviewed participants. In the case of analytical methods, words can be counted and searched for. On the other hand, the analysis can be about the identification of synonyms. In some of these approaches, one also finds the procedure of comparing sentence parts, sentence passages, with each other with regard to their content-related significance. That is, an analysis on different levels, on the level of the word, up to the content-related understanding of sentences or whole sections. The other approach is more about understanding the story. What is really meant by the statement a participant makes? It is rather about the content, detached from individual terms, detached from sentence constructions. And so we find various starting points for creating meaning from what we have in the context of a qualitative data collection. If we now go further and look into the direction of quantitative data analysis, we will first find three simple basic constructions. First, univariate data analysis. This means that the measured variable under consideration is one-dimensional. That is, we are talking about a single variable. Besides the question of scaling, a variable in univariate statistics can be described by location parameters and scattering parameters, which we will deal with in more detail in the lecture. With regard to bivariate data analysis, we basically have an independent and a dependent variable. For example, a change in costs affects sales, or a change in prices affects sales. In multivariate data analysis, we try to get broader on the side of the independent variables. That is, more explanatory variables come into play, because the researcher may perceive the world as more complex, and he or she may want to operate with more data. In other words, sales depend not only on changes in price or costs, but also, for example, on advertising measures, changes in shelf space, the friendliness of staff. One can imagine many variables here that have an effect on the outcome variable. And this is actually the standard case in economics. We rarely have a situation where only one variable influences another variable. If we take a closer look at quantitative data analysis, we have different types of methods to investigate relationships and differences between variables. First of all, the basic question is, do we look at differences or do we look at relationships? Let's first look at relationships. So we have two variables and we want to know how closely these two variables are related with each other. And now it depends very much on what characteristics these variables have. In the simplest case, the variable is metrically scaled. That means we're talking about regression. In addition, there is a hypothesis about cause and effect. If we do not have this cause and effect hypothesis, it is only a matter of determining the relationship between the variables. Then we are in the realm of correlation. If the variables are not even metric, but only ordinal, then we are talking about rank correlations. As you can see, which of these methods is used depends both on the assumption of causality and on the characteristics of the variables. In terms of differences, we also have two basic test types for independent samples and for paired samples. And here we find a large number of tests that are used, again depending on the data structure that exists. And this is how we approach the decision in principle. Which procedure do we use to perform which test? Is it about differences? Is it about relationships? Which data structure is present? And then we select the appropriate test. We will talk more about this decision tree in the course of the lecture.